Great. Okay. Well, I'm going to introduce Rachel, our CEO at Northamptonshire Community Foundation, and she's going to be talking to us today about annual reports that shine crafting and impacting stories with less. Over to you, Rachel.
Thank you very much, Alex, for that brilliant introduction. You can see in the background of this wonderful, very swish presentation, the crafting aspect, thanks to PowerPoint. I'm delighted to take part in the Learn and Share sessions, which are coordinated by our brilliant grants team led by Alex, just to highlight that, as you can imagine, we fund groups and charities of all shapes and sizes, particularly small place-based organisations and community groups. So this presentation isn't pitched at a masterclass level, it's pitched at an accessible level. I'm happy to do a follow-up advanced version if there's a requirement for that. When I'm not CEOing, I'm also a trustee of the Match Girls Memorial Charity and St Giles Charity Estates. So I also do have direct experience of supporting other charities to also help shape their impact reports. But what I would start off by saying is it's really possible to create an impactful annual report on a tight budget with limited resources. And it can even lead to a more focused, engaging result. So this is hopefully some key guidance and assurances to keep everybody confident in what they're putting together. I know I recently had a meeting with Jenny, who's in the room, and I know that some organisations and charities are really busy contending with a number of challenges, and an annual report might be another sort of perhaps overwhelming piece of work in addition to several other areas. So without much further ado, first of all, it's asking the question, particularly for new and emerging and smaller groups and charities, around the why bother? What's the purpose of an annual review? Well, there are some really key areas of purpose, and one is to show your impact to your supporters. This can be one of your strongest communication tools that you can use throughout the year, through your board of trustees, through your management committee, through your staff, through your volunteers, to highlight your story and why you're worth supporting, investing in, promoting, and what you're trying to do to make a better world on our doorstep. It also helps build trust with donors and funders. Communication is everything, and also timing is. So being able to put out an annual report highlighting your impact to your trust and to your donors and funders to show what you're doing with those grant awards and with those donations is a key way of building up a track record of being a trusted charity and organisation. And also from sort of a legal and due diligence perspective, it's about accountability and transparency about what your charity and your organisation is up to, what you're doing with the funds and donations that you've been awarded. And also, I would say that an impact report is a fundraising tool. It's an obvious fundraising tool and in quite a simple format that you can take out to meetings and events to leave a prospective donor, a prospective supporter, a prospective stakeholder with easy at-hand information. It's also really helpful for your trustees and your management committee members to be able to feel confident about the messages that they're sharing about why potential donors and stakeholders should be supporting your organisation and charity, and helps arm them with the information and data to hand that they might need to have those conversations on your behalf. It's also an opportunity to celebrate and reflect on your achievements as a team throughout the year. Being able to review all of that distilled information in one place is a recognition of the hard work, perhaps challenges that have overcome, the difference that you've made in local people's lives, the causes that you've addressed, whether that be tackling poverty, supporting good health and well-being, supporting and reducing inequalities, supporting gender equality, providing quality education, helping people get back into work, building sustainable communities. It's a way of being able to distill some of those key messages about what you do to make a difference. And also inspiring future support. Within your annual report, there can be a call to action. There can be information about ways to give, ways to find out more information, and contact details. So one of the key tips is to keep it short, visual, and heartfelt in terms of the messaging that you're providing. Okay, and so what to include, the core ingredients into a really good annual report. First of all, I would talk about something that I'll highlight is about clarity over complexity. So focus on your core message. What's the one thing you want anybody reading your impact report to walk away with in terms of the knowledge of your community group or your charity, and build your report around that. There are some standard ingredients, but they're a variation on a theme. One is always a key message from your director, your CEO, your chair, your board of trustees. Another is your key achievements, what you've done across the last year to make a difference in line with your charitable mission and purpose. Your impact in numbers. For example, if you're a food bank, that could be the number of people you've supported, the number of meals you've served, the number of food parcels that you've given out. And also real stories. We know that it's the stories that get to the heart of the matter of the difference that charities make. So quotes or short stories can really add colour to the impact that you highlight in terms of your quantifiable numbers and information. And also a heartfelt thank you to your supporters and donors, and perhaps a further call to action. So another tip is using photos and bold numbers that really, really stand out. And then something else is to think about leveraging what you already have. So repurposing existing content, don't reinvent the wheel. I know that's a cliche, but it's true. Blog posts, perhaps that staff or trustees have used throughout the year. So really mine those resources to support the copy. Look at your social media updates and maybe lift some of those to go into the annual reports. Look at internal reports and use copy there rather than having to write anything from scratch. And do some short team interviews to get feedback from staff, from trustees, from volunteers that you can also adapt and add to your annual impact report. And in what I'm trying to say there is that you've likely already created much of the raw material you need. It's just a matter of curating it and shaping it. Okay, and so in terms of gathering content, the easy way to follow on from that, some key asks, particularly for small community groups and charities in the room where this might be your first annual report. Apologies to those who are already on that journey over several years, is starting with your core resource, and that's asking your team and staff, what are you most proud of this year? What's been the highlights or achievement from your perspective as a team member? And perhaps that will help you diversify some of your core and key achievements from across your last financial year. Grab 2 or 3 quotes from beneficiaries or volunteers to really highlight the volunteer commitment to your cause, and also the benefit and impact that you're having for your clients, your service users, your beneficiaries. Again, use social media posts you've already made across LinkedIn, X, the artist formerly known as Twitter, Instagram, and other new social media platforms such as Blue Sky, which some of you already may be signed up to. Check your funding reports, reuse statistics you've already written, and don't try and create something from the beginning. And authenticity is also, where possible, use photographs or genuine photographs, obviously with appropriate permissions, not stock images for that to come through. And prioritize the visuals that matter. And I would say, particularly for first timers in creating an annual impact report, use simple and consistent visuals, like clean charts of photographs of your team or of your impact stats. And tools like Canva or PowerPoint can really help you do the job. You don't need a design agency. And in fact, there's something about being too glossy that I think doesn't always quite resonate. And besides, you clearly, for a number of groups and charities we fund, you may not have the budget for that. Just think about a thoughtful use of space, colour, and typography can go a long way. If you don't have any dedicated comms within your staff team, look to see if you can get a volunteer or perhaps a sponsor to support the development of that. You can go to the local university. I know that they're always trying to assign students, particularly in their creative, on their creative degrees, to be able to support local charities with work that can also enhance their degree. And then something else I would talk about is about keeping it human, keeping it real. Include the real voices from your stakeholders, stories from the field, a message also from your core senior team, whether that be your chair, your CEO, or a lead staff member. It's important to remember that people connect with people, so a heartfelt quote can be far more powerful than a slick infographic designed by a design company. Okay, so moving on and back into making it visual, just some very simple design tips. You can use free tools like Canva or PowerPoint. It's good to use big fonts and big numbers and maybe look at 1 to 2 colors. That's for useful readership. Something that I've sort of learned along the way is that there can sometimes be, and this is a mistake that I've made myself, is wanting to try and say everything and having lots of text and copy where somebody doesn't quite know, first of all, in terms of a busy life, where to start reading, where to stop, what to remember. You really want to distill and guide some really key facts, some key data, so that when somebody reads an impact report, rather than trying to get through a 30-page, 20-page document, something that's 4 to 10 pages maximum, can really, really capture some of your core messages. And most importantly, the reader's likely to remember those messages. And when you use that as a tool, your trustees, volunteers, ambassadors, stakeholders, and donors are likely to remember that key data, that key information that they can then very happily recycle in conversations with potential donors and stakeholders. And try and keep to one message per page rather than re-highlighting your whole charitable mission, and think about that aligning with what you've achieved with any, for example, particular projects and activities. Don't overload with text because people skim read, and lead with emotion in terms of what you're trying to say, and also the results that you've achieved across the year, and really celebrate those. And then also just to be mindful that this doesn't have to be created in paper form, although we create our impact reports and publish them in paper form because they're a really useful fundraising tool to hand out. But you can just as easily save funds by going digital, specifically with PDF, with a web page on your website, or a slideshow through PowerPoint slides, which you can always share via email, and you can always print a few copies later as and when resources allow. Again, being mindful of small groups and charities that might be in the room. And a well-formatted digital report in that sense is easier to share, probably more cost effective, and often gets more engagement in a digital world. And leaning into keeping it short, sweet, and shareable. Again, this is for the small groups and charities in the room. Don't feel overwhelmed in terms of preparing the document. 4 to 6 pages max can really work. Save as a PDF for email and for web. Post snippets on your social media so that you keep reusing and recycling your annual report information across the year. The art of repetition is something that will really get your message strongly across and your key aims and your key achievements and the social impact and social change that you're making. Again, add to your website with a simple download link. And again, a sort of a useful tip hopefully is to reuse content in newsletters or funding bids or similar, so that you're not having to start from scratch in writing and creating copy for your annual report. So a key checklist is making sure that you have a cover with your logo and your year, a one-page welcome or thank you notes, 1 to 2 impact highlights, numbers and stories, and then also a real quote or case study in terms of the work that you've been carrying out, and a final thank you to supporters. Don't aim for perfection, aim for authenticity. You might have had a really challenging year, so also talk about that story as well. Highlight some of the needs, because that can help maybe create a really strong call to action within your annual report. And something in terms of your sort of time and space and resource to create this annual report. Set clear boundaries, set a timeline, a number of pages, the key metrics that you want to include, and a basic outline, and then work from there. So that's creating a structure in order to work towards. Constraints, I always think, can be a creative asset. Necessity is the mother of invention. They help you stay focused, and most importantly, they reduce overwhelm when you have a number of challenging aspects to your job and your work that you might be contending with. So hopefully that's helpful. And then if you're needing extra help or support, ask a volunteer to help or design it. Contact your local University of Northampton. A core part of their strategy now is community outreach and social impact. They're really keen for volunteers to get involved with local charities, and they have lots of students on creative courses that I'm sure would relish the opportunity to also develop their own CV. Use AI tools like ChatGPT for writing help, and free tools like canva.com and Unsplash for free images. And then just a useful tip, and apologies for the seasoned annual report writers in the room, but each year will get easier. Save a template and work to that structure. So what does that look like in real time? So this is imagining a charity called Hope in Action, and this is their annual review for last year. And their strapline is strengthening lives through community support. They've put a great photograph on the front of their report. That's actually Baby Basics, a wonderful charity that we support. But for the benefit of this sample report, we're using lots of different photographs from different groups and charities that we fund. So have a really impactful photograph, be really clear about getting the year right, and a key message as well. And then a key message from the team, and this can include obviously a team photo or a candid moment of an impactful project or service that you've been providing with some beneficiaries. So maybe think about the key messages about maybe this year's brought challenges and triumphs, but we'd like to thank everyone for your support. We've reached more people than ever. You can show that a bit later in the impact stats and facts. Every donation hour volunteered and act of kindness is counted, and this is what that might look like in a simple format design with a message from the director, board, and or the chair of the trustees. Okay, then help remind everybody, because somebody might be reading your annual report for the first time, of your mission. So the core mission of Hope in Action, as the example, is to provide practical support and human connections to those most in need, providing weekly food parcels to families in crisis, delivering housing support and signposting, and offering mental health and wellbeing check-ins. And just in terms of design, there's lots of tools to help you get quite a consistent and smart design without having to resort to procuring a design company. So you might want to present the mission in a different way. You might want it to be photographic and compelling, and you might want to already highlight some of your impact numbers. So relating to that, that could be, again, Hope in Action's mission is providing practical support, human connection to those in need. In the last year, they've provided counselling for 85 individuals, weekly food parcels to 120 families, housing support to 40 people. So really distilling some of your core achievements across the last year. And then your impact section, particularly if you're a small group or charity, you might be quite new to collating impact data. You might not necessarily have been collating that information in a consistent way across the year. So perhaps stick to some core numbers in terms of funds that you've been able to raise, volunteer hours accrued due to the number of volunteers that support your work and that you've delivered into the community, the number of people supported, and the number of meals distributed, if you are the hypothetical Hope in Action based on your core mission to help alleviate food poverty and provide that support. And then the stories of impact. Remember, numbers with stories matter. This really helps people be able to really connect with your charity, with your organisation, with the heart as well as the mind, in terms of what you're doing to affect social impact and social change on your doorstep in Northamptonshire. So it's just an example quote from a beneficiary, Sarah: "Before I found you, I was completely alone. Now I feel like I matter." So focus on emotional connection and change. And this is what that might look like. There's Sarah. She's met some new friends. She's connected through Hope in Action. And now that photo with that quote really resonates and captures a moment in terms of the difference that you're making, that the data and numbers won't do in the same way, but together they complement each other. And then think about a section to highlight the difference that you're making in the community and the role that volunteers play within your organisation alongside your staff team members. And that could be highlighting the number of volunteers who support your work, the number of organisations that you partner with and collaborate with. But for as this example, it could be that the organisation partners with a number of similar organisations and charities, either because they're all based in a similar community or area, whether that be Corby, East Northamptonshire, Daventry, Wellingborough or Towcester, or whether that's because thematically you are addressing the same issue, whether that's supporting young people, whether that's being a community transport provider, whether that's because you're tackling food poverty and you might be part of a local food aid alliance. Highlighting the number of events you've put on to raise awareness of your work within the community, and perhaps a great quote from a volunteer or one of your partners. In this case, together we make the impossible possible. So really highlighting the role that partnership and collaboration plays at the heart of your charity. And that's what this might look like if you go for a photographic element, perhaps a really great photo of some volunteers. In this case, I'm kindly borrowing photograph from Powering the Mind Networks, who do some extraordinary, fantastic work and are currently supporting a project with one of our donors, Food for Heroes. And you might want to change that message by also saying thank you to your thank you to your volunteers by saying thank you for being the heart of the work that we do in the community. And a really key point that goes back to accountability, transparency, and building trust with donors and supporters and the trusts and foundations that fund you, is giving a snapshot of your finances in terms of income sources, be that grants, donations, funds generated through events, and then expenditure, where the money's gone in terms of programme delivery, core costs and administration, and your fundraising efforts, to name a few. And there are some really great tools that you can use to support what you've done with those donations in terms of income and expenditure. Visual information is really compelling, but you can put this in the form of a short accounts table as well. And then some messages about looking ahead. This isn't just a fundraising toolkit and a celebration of your achievements and a distilled story of the social impact and difference that you've made across the last year. This is also, your annual report can also be a call to action, looking ahead, why your trustees, your ambassadors, your funders, your donors, your prospective donors that you haven't met yet, you're just waiting to get into the right room with them to hand over this annual report. What's your call to action? What are your developments? What are your project plans in accordance with your strategy that you're taking forward to expand and promote the work you're doing? So for the hypothetical example of Hope in Action, they're looking to expand mental health support to 3 new towns. That could be perhaps looking in the West, expanding out to Towcester, to Brackley, and also Daventry. It could be that they're launching a youth mentoring program. Could be that they're building a network of local volunteers to expand their service offer to the local community. Don't forget to say thank you. It's so incredibly important to thank supporters, volunteers, and donors. You can add logos, you can add group images. This is, in this case, Kingswood, the KHL Big Local Trust Group, whose funding programme was supported over a number of years. Don't forget your contact details and a message to say what you're intending to do across the next year. And in this case, Hope in Action are working with partners, donors, volunteers, and supporters to build a brighter future. Thank you for listening. I appreciate that's not a sophisticated masterclass. If there are any of you in the room that want to take it to another level, I'm happy to do an advanced session subject to Alex's schedule for the learn and share sessions, or I'm happy to follow up with any one-to-one conversations, and I will stop sharing there.